All right, welcome everybody. Let's do our Rhino 2D worksheet together. Before we address geometry and tools and commands, let's make sure that our user interface is set up so that we can work comfortably in it and we kind of know where everything is. The first thing that I want to check is along the very top of the screen, if I come over to Tools, and then go down to Options. In this list here, I want to find Units, and I just want to make sure that I'm working in inches and that my absolute tolerance is set to 0.001. And then check OK. Now you'll notice you've got 4 viewports here. You've got perspective, top, front, and right. Because we're only going to be working with 2D geometry right now, we can double click on top, and then the only viewport we see here is going to be the top one. Next, you've got another list of different tool sets right up here. We want to select Curve Tools. In Rhino, curve is the same thing as vector. So a vector is any line that has a definite dimension, a definite length, and direction. So it has the ability to be translated mechanically, say with 3D printing, laser cutting, CNC machining, and so on. Your Curve Tools list should be on the left-hand side. It should look kind of like this. Next thing we want to do is either if you're working on Mac, it's going to be right around here, or if you're on PC, you'll have these options down here. We want to check a couple of these things. Where it says end, and if I hover over it, it says endpoint object snap. I'm going to check end, near, mid, cen, C-E-N is in center, and I-N-T for intersection. So these are the snaps. And what these do is going to be really important, really helpful for our geometry. Lastly, so by now we should have a Curve Tools set on the left. We should have our snaps turned on, just these 5 snaps right here. And then there's a couple more options really towards the bottom of the interface that we want to have on too. O-snap, we want to have O-snap on, and we also want to have gumball turned on. So O-snap and gumball should both be checked there. There's one extra thing I forgot to mention. If we go back to Tools and in Options, I think defaultly when you open a new Rhino project, right here where it says grid, I think generally grid lines are going to be on. So if I click OK, first time you come in, you're going to see a matrix of intersecting grid lines like this. I don't think we really need these, so I always keep them turned off. They just kind of get in the way. All right. Now, navigating your viewport space, your actual workspace here. If you are working with an auxiliary mouse, I think you'll find it's a lot easier to do all of this. It'll be a right click and drag to pan, or basically without changing the cone of vision, move your camera around the workspace. A scroll wheel will zoom in and out. And let's say for a second that we were in a perspective viewport instead of the top viewport. Holding Shift while you right click and drag will also allow you to pan whereas just holding right click and drag will change the cone of vision. All right, let's go back to the top viewport here and start on some of these little exercises. So single line is probably one of the first things you're always going to use when you're creating a new 3D model. So right here, this diagonal line tool from the Curve Tools menu. If I click this, one click will place the first point of this line segment, and then the second click will complete the segment. When I click on this line segment now, you'll notice we've got a little widget that pops up. It's a green arrow, a red arrow. Those are to, if I just click the point of these arrows, these allow me to move this line segment along the X and Y axes. And if I want to change the angle, I'll do the same thing with this little curved blue line here. If I want to adjust the angle in a very exacting way, I just click the blue line once, and then I can specify I want it to be 30 degrees, or if I want to turn it back the way it was, I'll click and I'll do minus 30 degrees. And if I need my single line, my line segment, to be perfectly vertical or perfectly horizontal, I'm going to place my first point from the line segment and then hold shift. You'll notice when I hold shift, it bounces up to be perfectly horizontal, or if I'm more biased towards vertical, it'll know what I want to do and it'll adjust to be vertical. All right, now to measure curves, because we might need to do a little bit of measuring from time to time. If I right click, and I think on Mac this would be control click, I might be wrong about that. Right click always equips the previously used tool. This might save you a lot of time as you're doing your model making. So I've got my single line tool again, and I'm going to make a little line. And I need to know exactly how long this line is. And remember, I'm working in inches, so whatever number I see, it's going to be inches. So the command bar up at the top of the screen, it's always waiting for you to type a command. You don't have to click inside this field. Anytime you are in Rhino and you start typing, it's waiting for you to type a command. So DIM is the dimension tool, and the command bar also prompts you. It walks you through how to do some of these tasks. So first dimension point, and this is, by the way, where our snaps come in really handy. If I hover over this, you'll notice that the word end pops up right by the end of that line, which means it's going to place this dimension tool exactly on that point. And I'll do the same thing over here. And now I know it's a 25.18 inch line. So anytime you need to take a measurement of something, DIM in the command bar, and you can just, if you want to get that measurement out of the way, you can just click on it and press delete. All right. Another really important tool that we'll probably make use of quite often is the rectangle corner to corner tool. So in the Curve Tools menu, down towards the bottom, I'll hover until I see rectangle corner to corner. If you want, just for fun, you could try out something else, rectangle 3 points. And if I want it to be oriented similarly to this, I can hold shift. But I think rectangle corner to corner is always a really nice, easy tool to use. So if I click on this rectangle, the gumball appears directly in the middle of the rectangle, which means this is just one item here, one piece of geometry. I can't really separate anything else from it. If I copy and paste and then drag this newly pasted rectangle over to the side, and then right up here, this tool, Explode, will allow me to separate these individual curves that make up the rectangle. You can also, of course, let me Control Z and put this back together. And by the way, either if you're on PC, you should see this at the top of your interface. If you're on Mac, it'll be at the very bottom. And it might be a little more narrow, kind of like this, but I like to keep my command history a little bit visible so that everything that happens as I'm working, there's a written record of it. So I just used the undo tool to rebuild this exploded rectangle. And all of these tools from the Curve Tools menu, they can also be affected as written commands. So explode, if I type this out in the command bar and then press enter, it does the same thing. Now, let's say that you have a multitude of parts and you want to assemble a rectangle from them. Here's how we can do that. Let me zoom in a little bit more here. I'll start with one of these curves, so I'll select this one over here, and in the command bar I want to type move and then enter. And this is one of those commands that the command bar is going to walk me through so I can follow all these steps. Point to move from. So I want to move from the top of this line. So I'm going to click here, and then the command bar, you'll notice it says point to move to. So now I'm going to click on the end of this upper line segment. And because my end snap is turned on, it's not guesswork that brings them together. It's precision. So they really are connected at the point. I'm going to do the same thing for these other line segments. So move. I'm going to move from the top of the line to the right side of that line. And then finally, I'm going to move the lower line into position like this. And I already knew ahead of time that this intersection would come together perfectly here. So let me click and drag from left to right and select all of these lines at the same time. And in the command bar, I'm going to type join and then enter. And now if I click anywhere on the rectangle, it's just one rectangle now. And by the way, the command history will tell you what you've selected. So before I used the join command, I had selected 4 separate curves. And once I joined them and then reselected, now it's one closed curve. That set of instructions, by the way, can be found over here. So give this a try in some of this empty space. Maybe try it a couple different ways. All right. Let's use the freeform curve tools because it's fun to be a little bit curled, a little bit wavy with some of our geometry. At the very top of the screen, in curve, everybody should have curve at the top of the screen. If we come down a little bit to freeform, let's do control points curve. So I'm just going to start this curve formation here and then really anywhere you want, you can create another point, and you can keep creating these control points until you're ready to stop. When you're ready to stop developing the line, you either right click or control click on Mac. That stops the generation of the line. Now, when I click on this freeform curve, hopefully you see these control points materialize in your workspace. I can click on one of these control points and change the character of this line a little bit if I want. It just helps with some fine tuning. Likewise, another really great tool is the curve freeform and then the interpolate points curve. So whereas the control points in this case are kind of like marionette puppet strings. You know, you change the quality of the line from a distance. The interpolate points curve, which by the way, I like to shop for these tools up here in the curve menu, but they also can be found here in the curve tools menu. So the interpolate points curve, the line passes through the points that you're setting down as you're generating the curve. So I'll stop there by doing right click. And now there's a difference though after you've generated the curve. So if I select this curve, now just like before, the control points are not located on the actual geometry, but they're a little bit more distant. And I think the point of that is you do have a little bit better control of how to fine tune a curve like this by using these more distant control points. And the rules apply equally to all kinds of curves. So if I select this, I can use the move command and I can move it from the starting point and attach it to some other curve. All right. Another great tool is the circle center radius tool that is right here in the curve tools menu. When I place the first point on my workspace, it's the radius that is following my cursor. So when I place the second one, I can tell what the measurement of this radius is by going back to my dimension tool, DIM. And this is another reason why we have checked our CEN center snap, because if I follow the circumference of the circle a little bit, you can see CEN appears next to the cursor, and it's giving me an opportunity to start a measurement or the generation of a new line or something from the very center of the circle. So let me click here, and then I'm going to, I just want a horizontal measurement, so I'm going to hold shift and wait until I find an intersection. So 14.51 inches is the radius for this circle. Let's say that you want to create a circle that has a very specific radius. We'll do our circle center radius. I'll click once, but before I click a second time, let's try aiming for a 16-inch circle. So in the command bar, I don't have to click there. Remember, I can just start typing. I'll just type 16, and it's going to make sure that the radius is exactly 16 inches. So I'll click, and to double check my work, I'll use the dimension tool, and I'll find the center, bring it to the edge. There we go, 16 inches. This also applies for creating, let's say that you wanted to create a single line of a certain length. I'll grab the single line tool, place my first point in the workspace, and then I'll say I want a 20-inch line. So I type 20 in the command bar, and it locks the development of that line at a certain point. I can check my work with DIM. There we go. And just one more little example for this kind of thing. The rectangle corner to corner. You need a 20, let's say a 16 by 20 inch box. So I'll click once, 16 inches, and then enter. But now you'll notice the command bar is asking me for the width, the other dimension. So now I can type 20 or 30 or whatever I need, and it'll give me that box. So let's make sure 16. By the way, I'm right-clicking to re-equip the previously used tool. In this case, it was the dimension tool. So there we go. And of course, let's say I wanted this to be wider than it is tall. I'll just select the rectangle, click once on this blue curve, and I'll rotate it 90 degrees. Perfect. All right, really simple tools there. Let's get into some shape building. All right, the polygon tool is at the very bottom of the curve tools menu. So let's equip this. We've got a little room to work over here. In the command bar, I see num sides equals 3. That's not very many, so let's do like 9. Okay, so now I can just click once in the workspace, drag this out a little bit, and then drag it back in. And you can do it this way or this way, whatever seems more interesting. So, all right, I've got one closed curve. It's a multi-sided polygon. And now we want to have another shape interfere with this somehow. I think an ellipse or a circle is perfectly fine for that. We've got an ellipse tool over here, ellipse from center. So I'll place my first point, and then I can hold shift to just keep the ellipse vertical. And let's drag this over top of the star, kind of like this. So at this point, and you can read about this right here, we're going to use the trim command. So we're going to hybridize these two shapes by trimming the geometry. So trim in the command bar. And I want to trim the star, which means the trimming object is going to be the ellipse. So I'm going to select the cutting object. That'll be this. And it says press enter when done. So enter. Now it says select object to trim, and pressing shift to extend. So if I had multiple separate curves all intersecting with this ellipse, I could select them all by holding shift. So I'm just going to start with this inner, some of these inner parts, and then the outer parts. Okay, so now that I've trimmed everything I want to trim, I'm going to press enter, and I still have two separate shapes. I don't really need the full ellipse anymore, so let me, since I dragged it away a little bit, let me Control Z and put it back where it was. And I'm going to do another trim. So trim in the command bar, And I'm going to use the star as the trimming object. So I'm going to select this, press enter, and now I'm going to click on this portion, so the part of the ellipse on this side of the star, and get rid of that. Now if I undo that and do trim again, use the star as the trimming tool, and I trimmed on this side, whoops, it will get rid of the portion on whatever side of the selected trimming tool. But in this case, I think I want to do it the other way. So undo that. And get rid of that. Okay. Now I want to just have one shape here, one curve, and not two. Right now I have two separate ones. So I'm going to join them by click and drag, select everything. And here's another really great trick. If I click and drag from left to right, my selection box has to cover everything. If I don't cover everything, let's say I start in here and I want to select it this way, I can't do it. But if I click and drag from right to left and don't cover everything, you can still select it without having to cover the entirety of that geometry. So there is a way that this is useful. Probably when we get to array linear, that'll be a little more useful. Okay, so now that I've selected these two, I'm going to join them. And if I click on this, it should just say one closed curve added to selection. Great. I know I'm working over here, but we've kind of made it to this point in the worksheet so far. All right. Bring it back down here. So I want to do some fancy stuff with this hybridized shape, but it's a little too sprawled out the way it is. It's a little too well balanced. So what I'm going to do is select it and then type in the command bar scale 1D, and that's all one word, by the way. Scale 1D, then enter, and it prompts you up here in the command bar base point. And I could use an actual point on this shape, but you don't really have to. Your base point can be anywhere. And what I want to do is use a base point down here. And I'm going to hold shift because I want to compress this shape in a perfectly horizontal way. So I'm going to hold shift, drag this out a little bit, and then click again, and then now bring it back. And then click one last time. And that changes the scale of this geometry, but only in one dimension. Let me make a copy of this real quick. So select and then Control C, Control V, or I think Mac is Command C, Command V. If I wanted to change the scale of this, but not just one dimensionally, I can just do scale. And so I'll select the object to be scaled. And I can click really anywhere, and it'll scale proportionally. This also applies to 3D models. All right, so now that I've got this compressed piece of geometry, let's use the array linear command. So in the command bar, array linear, and it prompts us select objects to array. That'll be this. Enter when done. And now it says number of items. Let's do 10. First reference point. So this is the first, the beginning of the array. So I'll just start at the top of this new squished hybridized shape and click once and then begin to drag it out this way. The linear array is really an interesting tool to use for 2D geometry, because if hybridizing shapes and coming up with some new form is what you're trying to do, and you're being very experimental with it, you can populate details really quickly with the array linear command. And let's say that we did an array linear and we wanted to trim away some of this overlapping geometry in the middle here. All I would really need to do is create additional geometry, say an extra line segment, and use the line segment as a trimming tool. And remember how I said if you click and drag from right to left, you can select a lot of things without having to cover everything with your selection box. So that philosophy is really helpful with trim commands. So just a cool little thing that might be helpful with some of your ideas. All right, now let me undo all of this. I'm going to borrow one of these arrayed shapes, and let's do the mirror command. So if you're working on a very precise idea for something, and symmetry is a really important factor, I would recommend working on half of it and then using a mirror command to finish everything else. So mirror in the command bar, select objects to mirror, that'll be this, and then enter, and then start of mirror plane. So in order to mirror, we need to create an axis here of some kind. So let me see if I start right here and then hold shift to keep this vertical. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And if I did mirror and used a horizontal axis, let's see what happens then. Same starting point. So this could be something. Okay. Last little trick here for 2D geometry. Let's do array polar. So I'm going to borrow now one of these, find a little spot, maybe over here. I can sprawl out a bit more. So in the command bar, array polar, select object to array, do this, and enter. And now it asks for the center of the polar array. So that could really be anywhere, but how about like right here? And the number of items, let's try 7. Okay, so now it prompts angle to fill or first reference point. So let's grab a hold of our geometry here. Click, and then let's bring this all the way around until we get back. And then enter, and there we go. So it's a set number of, oh, except we only have 6, and I asked for 7. So perhaps we have to account for that extra little bit of space. Anyway, we can figure that out. Okay, so after you've completed each of these exercises in the empty space provided, check out these other little workspaces. using what you know about basic 2D geometry, how would you create a repeating pattern that contains both straight lines and curved lines? Super open-ended thing. Just give it a try, see what you can come up with. And then use a combination of the 2D tools and commands to create a unique design here. Very similar things. The whole point here is you get a little more practice with some of these 2D tools and commands. All right. Hopefully this is all really clear. Reference this video anytime you want to, or ask me over email or in class. I'm happy to clear any of this up with you. All right. Thank you.